by Riverside.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Tiffany Lawrence, and I'm bringing to you the Wealthy Educator Podcast. And I'm so excited today to say that I actually have my first guest today. So I am so excited to introduce you to my second mother. This is Mrs. Retion George, and she is an educator. And people question, why did I become a teacher? It's probably secretly her fault. So my I'm going to let Miss George, my mom, tell you a little bit about herself, and kind of her journey into why she became an educator.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Just like Tiffany said, she blames me. I blame my parents. I'm the oldest of five children. And it was my job every day was to make sure that the other four got all their homework done and done right. And I would tell my parents, but they don't get it. I showed them how to do it and they don't get it. And my mom would always say, then try something different. And then I would get frustrated, but I would try something different. And I think in the long run, it helped me when they started talking about how you have to do all this diversification with students. I think being in charge of four children, four siblings, helped me with that. So, and that's why I always wanted to be a elementary school teacher. But then, as I was in college, so I don't know what changed me. I guess because I became a mother while I was in college, and I was like, oh, I want to deal with little kids at home and little kids at school. So I decided to become a high school teacher. So my goal was to become an elementary school teacher, and then I changed to a high school math teacher because math has always been my favorite subject.
Okay, okay. I don't think I knew that you wanted to be an elementary teacher, which is crazy. I knew you wanted to be a math teacher, but I didn't know that part. So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. So the first question or next question that I have is tell us, we talk a lot about people's behavior around money, and sometimes it's often shaped about by how they grew up. And so I wanted you to talk to the audience about your relationship with money growing up, kind of like your money story and the things that you think influenced you around money.
Well, okay. It started out well. When I was my father died when I was 12, so up to that point we were a middle class family. So we did, we lived in a middle class neighborhood. Matter of fact, we lived in a virtually all white neighborhood. When they first bought the house, it was all white neighborhood. And then over the years it changed a little bit, but it still was a middle class neighborhood. And after my father died, well, during the time that he was living, we had things easy. We had the typical what and we had the house, we had the car matched the house in color. We had the whatever the current car was, that's what we had. And we didn't want for a whole lot of anything. Then when I turned 12, my father died and everything changed. My mother, well, my dad worked, they both worked for for the federal government. My mom worked for the IRS and my dad worked in the printing shop. So when he passed, my mother never went back to work. So we went from a two income family to really almost a no income family. So she was able to get his retirement and his Social Security after so many years, but she never ever let us know how we still thought we were middle class, even
Mm,
though our income had been cut probably into at least a third of it was gone. No, two-thirds of it was gone probably. But we still were able to do all the things we were able to do before my father passed. And in retrospect and looking back, I was an adult when I realized how much money she was getting every month. And I was like, I asked her one day, I said, Mama, how'd you live off of that? How'd you do that with five children? And she said, I just had to make it work. but she never once told us, I can't, you can't do this, you can't do that. We don't have enough food to eat. I can't pay the light. But she never said that. And I'm
Mm,
sure she had to be struggling because that amount of money, I don't even know how she could even keep the lights on. That's
yeah,
how low her income was. So she
yeah.
went from middle class to lower class, or we all did, but we didn't know we did. So watching my mother manage her money, I said if she can manage that little bit of money that she had, there's no excuse for anybody else. So there was no way I was not going to be able to manage my money and tell my mother, "Oh, I make more money than you do, but I can't manage it."
I can't
That
manage
just
it.
wasn't that wasn't
Yeah,
happening. That was
yeah,
not happening.
yeah,
So I learned early to manage my money.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It would look kind of funny if you said, "Well, I make double what you make, and I can't make it work." For sure.
Right, right. She would have been like, "What's wrong with you? I didn't teach you anything." So
Exactly.
I couldn't have that. So
So as you've gotten older, like has your relationship with money kind of changed, or you feel like it's kind of the same because of how you grew up and her teaching you the ways of how to manage your finances?
it's kind of the same because although there have been times when I've really had it hard because like, I had surgery one a few years, probably 30 years ago, and it took them forever to start giving me the pay, my I had sick days, but they were trying to not give me my money for the sick days, and then I went on short-term disability, and that took forever. So during that period of time, I had to figure out how to manage and still keep the lights on and still keep the house and still keep everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was rough, but I just I thought back on how she did it, and I tried to do some of the things that she did. And one of the things that I always do, and still do most of the time, is write a budget on how I'm going to spend my money. So if I have $50, I want to know how I'm spending $50. If I have $500, I kind of portion that out so that the money stretches and I can pay everybody a little bit. Because I learned a long time ago, even if you can't pay it all, if you pay them something, you're in good standing.
Yeah, yeah. The you mentioned something because with you being in education, you mentioned about being on disability. So from that experience, did you learn anything that other educators would need to know or maybe check into related to disability that maybe they may not realize because that's not something that happens to everybody?
I would tell people because I have had friends who usually I don't know because I've been out of the education, I've been out of teaching for a few years. I don't know if they still do it or not, but you used to get an option of whether you wanted to take the short term and long term disability or not. And
Mm-hmm.
I had friends who would not take it because
Mm-hmm.
they said that's extra money coming out of their pocket that they could use.
Yeah.
And after that, after my situation, a lot of them were like, "Ooh, maybe I better start taking it." And
Yeah.
after my situation, there's no way I would have done without it. So I would suggest or recommend if you had that option, definitely take both because you don't
Yeah.
know. You never
Yeah.
know.
The only I've taken disability, two babies. The
Right.
so I took disability. But I did learn something once I started accumulating a lot of sick leave, depending on the school district. I had some school districts that required that I take the sick leave before I took my disability. And sometimes if
Yes.
I had too much sick leave, it was almost pointless to have short term because I would roll right into long term. I didn't even know
Right.
that was a thing and until somebody in HR told me that. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, well, they're gonna make you take your sick leave first anyway. And so you'll be in long term before you get that. But that was after I was in teaching, 10 plus years. I had
Right.
a lot of leave at that point. But as a baby teacher, when I had my first baby, disability was very important because I ended up on well, it's a long story. The audience had two babies, but I lost one baby and then the next baby I ended up on bed rest. And so I ended up on disability for much longer than I anticipated. And that was really game changing, having to live off 67% of my income. And so that was like my first bout with like true disability, and realizing how important it was to be prepared for that. And even like as a baby teacher, I would even tell people, if you're going to have a baby, really look at your benefits for you and your spouse if you are married, and plan
Right.
like who's going to stay home, how long you want somebody to stay home, and time it right. I was blessed because one of my babies was born on right in May. So I kind of got the summer as a free, like a gimme, and then I took my leave. So I got almost 6 months with my baby without having to really have a check alteration, because I had the sick leave plus the summer to add to it. And so that was
Right.
really helpful for me.
And something else I learned too that I would add to that sick leave type thing is if it's a child, if it's your with your children, like you want to be home with your children. Something that I did is we would take turns. Like I would be home in the morning and he would be home in the afternoon, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would take a day, he would take a day. So that helped. And a veteran teacher told me that you don't always have to take a full day,
Correct.
and that
Correct.
stretches your days out even more if you don't have the disability.
Correct.
So that's
Correct.
something to keep in mind.
Correct. Okay, so, and you mentioned in previous to the audience that you no longer teach, and I'm sure they figured that out a little bit yet, because you're my mom and I'm already 40 plus plus. So how many years were you a teacher?
As long as you are old, almost. I taught, I taught for 38 years and I was a sub for 2 years. So total in the classroom of 40 years. But actually, that's not even quite accurate because after I retired, I realized that by the end of the summer, I'm going to go crazy if I just sit at home. So now I'm back in the classroom. I'm doing tutoring, which is better than teaching. So if you add these years, I really still, I'm past your age now. I'm at 47. So,
Yeah, I get it. And I tell everybody that they'll say, "Well, are your parents retired?" And I'll say, "Well, I can't tell they retired, because it seems like they go to work every day now." Like, and I'm so confused by that. But to each his own. I'm looking to retire, and I'm not going back. So
well, that's what I said too. But by the end of the summer, I was like, okay, so what am I going to do all day? You can only clean the house so much. But the thing about retirement, though, like I was saying to someone the other day, I said, if I decide, even though I'm working, if I decide I want to take a week off, I take a week off.
yeah, so you get to
And if
choose.
I get to choose exactly. If I were in the classroom, like I just came back from a girls' trip during the school year, I wouldn't have been
Tell
able to
everybody
do
where
that.
you went so they can know where you went.
I went to Panama City, Panama, had a
And
great time. And had I been teaching, I wouldn't have been able to do that with the other ladies. So,
yes. Yes.
yes.
So was you mentioned actually what I was going to ask you next is what are you doing now after retirement? So was working a second job, and then you probably sort of answered this, was it really already in the plan, or it just kind of happened because you got bored kind of being at home?
I got bored being at home because I used to use my summers to start getting ready for the next year, as crazy as that sounds. So that first summer, the district did a retirement party, and when we came outside of the auditorium, they had two tables, one for you to sign up to be a substitute, one for you to sign up to be a tutor. And they were calling us, come and sign up. I said, I'm not getting ready to do that. And they laughed. And I laughed with them. But they got the last laugh because they called in August and said, hey, we need subs. You want to sub? I said, oh, no, I would not sub. So by September, I'm like, okay, the house is spotless. The walls don't need painting again. I was just bored. So they called and said, hey, would you like to be a tutor? And I said, well, what does that entail? They said, you just go in here and you work with some Title I students and you teach math. And my question was, do I have to go to faculty meetings? No. Do I have to have parent meetings? No. Do I have to have any kind of meetings? No. Do I have to write lesson plans? No. Sign me up.
Look,
So that's
sign me up. If that was the rules, I would still be a teacher.
I know that's right. Me too. Me too.
Exactly. So did you do like any financial planning related to like what you're gonna do? Like how did you kind of think about I'm gonna retire? How did you plan for that?
Okay, well, it started way back when I first started teaching. Probably my second year of teaching, I decided I started putting money into a 403B plan. I don't even know if they
Okay.
still have 403B, but and so I was doing that clear until I moved to Georgia. Then when I moved to Georgia, I kind of slacked up on it. So I didn't do as much. And once I moved in Georgia, so the first 20 years of my first 20, actually, probably 22 years of my career, I was putting money away. And then
So
when I
what
moved to
percentage were
Georgia,
you putting into the
mm,
403B when you were cuz so to the
ooh,
audience, so she used to when I was little, they lived in Michigan. So the first half of my life it was Michigan.
right. And so I was putting probably because it was pre-tax money. So I don't even remember how much I was putting in there, but it was a nice amount. It was a nice
Okay.
amount.
Okay. And currently, Georgia educators do still have access to a 403B. So, like she mentioned, 403Bs are a an account where it basically helps you decrease your adjusted gross income and makes your taxable amount less. Like, so for instance, if you made $50,000 and you put $10,000 in a 403B, that money would not be counted in the amount that they determine that you're paying on taxes. It's the way that people are able to decrease their taxes in a legal way and not
Right.
necessarily try to cheat the system.
Exactly.
So you were putting into the 403B for 20 plus years in Michigan, then you transitioned to Georgia, and then what was different in Georgia?
I don't know in Georgia. Well, first of all, it wasn't it it wasn't there the same programs I was using in Michigan. They didn't I could not find that here. So it wasn't as easy to transfer my money. So I ended up just leaving my money there
Okay.
until with the program the companies that I had it in Michigan. But when I thought start thinking about retiring, I talked to a young lady and she helped me come up with the money, how a plan on what I'm going to do in retirement. And so I put part of my money in a fund that's it's growing, but it's in like a stock fund. And
Mm-hmm.
that's my money that if I need play money or extra money, I go to that account. Then I have
Okay.
another fund that I don't touch, and it's just growing. So
Okay.
I'm still kind of still have my money set aside working for me. So, you know, in case one day I can't do anything and I want some money, I want to maintain my standard of living. So I'll still
Mm-hmm.
have that fund over here that I'm not touching. And if it's left, then I guess my children and grandchildren will have some money. If anything left.
Okay. And so that was kind of tied into so the investment accounts were different in Georgia and not
Yes,
as good as the ones you had in Michigan, pretty much is what you're saying, right?
correct. Yes,
Okay, and that's important because I think some people don't realize that different states, even though we all have access to 403Bs, they don't always offer the same quality of investment accounts. And so that's
correct.
something I want to encourage educators because even in the state of Georgia, every district have different vendors. And
Hmm.
often some vendors charge higher fees than other vendors. And so you want to do some real research into do you have a quality product? Because some 403Bs charge fees that are so high that it is
Right.
pretty much ripping you off. That's a whole nother episode of the podcast though, and I definitely am gonna hit that. But I want to put that bug in your ear because that does matter in the long run. What was the difference between the two pension programs? Because I know when you got older and you got to start telling us kids that you were retiring, you were kind of telling me about two different pensions. So what was the difference?
So I get pension from Michigan and I get pension from Georgia. And in order to so when I left Michigan, again, these these older veteran teachers, they know a lot. So when I left Georgia, I mean left Michigan, I was the baby in the department. So
Okay.
when I left Michigan, all the teachers, they didn't want me to go first of all, but then they were giving me advice and one of them, the best advice I got was to just freeze my Michigan retirement. And that way, when I came to Georgia, I'd have a choice. So I could have started drawing the Michigan retirement when I left, but I didn't actually retire from Michigan. I just left Michigan. And I retired from Michigan at the same time I retired from Georgia, if that makes any sense. So I never,
Absolutely.
it does. Okay. Okay. So once I got to Georgia, once I got ready to retire, Georgia said I could do one of two things. I can get two retirements, one from Michigan and one from Georgia, or I could buy my years from Georgia and transfer my money. I was like, by the time I buy my money, which made no sense to me. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to be to my advantage to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing you had to be careful on, when I moved from Michigan to Georgia, I was told that Michigan was a reciprocal state. However, when I got ready to retire, did not give me pay for the 38 years that I had in Michigan. Actually 40, because Michigan counted my years as subbing. So they did not pay me for all the years. So I should have retired with 40 years. They only retired me with, I think it was 25. They didn't give me the full 40.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't give me the full 40. Yep.
Wow. That's something to definitely look into when you change states for sure.
Yes. And be
Okay.
careful when they say reciprocal, because one of the questions I ask, and maybe it's because I changed districts after I got here, because
Mm-hmm.
one of the questions I asked before I took the job here is, will my retirement years stay the same? And I was told yes, but it could be because I was in a different district at the time I retired.
Oh, okay. Because so different HRs had different answers for questions. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
That would be super important and something like what so my plan, I'm not on a 30-year plan. So I tell you guys that all the time. My parents
Right.
highly disagree, audience. But my plan is kind of I'm either going out at a 20 something or I'm going to do 25 and I am planning to try to buy 3 years. And if I buy 3 years, I'll go out with 28 years. And so that's kind of like my plan and that has me coming out I think right around 53 if I actually do
Hmm.
that plan. Now, the thing in the state of Georgia that I want to make educators aware of is that if you come out in less than 30 years, they penalize you about 7% for every year you draw retirement before your 30-year mark. And it does not matter how old you are if you do that. If you don't have the full 30 years, every year you come out, they take 7% of your pension and keep it. So, because of that, even though I'm going to buy 28, I am going to wait until I'm 60 to draw. So just like my mom saying is how she waited for the Michigan money, I would do the same thing. So I'm not planning to necessarily pull in the money for the 28 years, but I'm going to make sure I have 28 years on the books because of the
Right.
7% rule. And so that's a hefty amount for somebody to take out of your pension. And so if you can make it, I say make it. My plan is not to not work. My plan is just to change careers. And so for me, I'm not looking to live off my pension just yet. So my other thing was, so you talked about investments, that was on my list. Um, did you have any relationship with debt during your career? Was it good or bad? Maybe tips for young teachers.
Yes. You get when you, well, it's easy to get yourself overwhelmed, especially when you find yourself in a bad situation and they keep sending you these credit cards. It's easy to get yourself into a position where you have more credit card or more money that's going out than you have coming in, or about the same amount. And so you have to kind of watch yourself. I kind of got close, but I was not to the point where I couldn't, step back and manage it. So I never
Mm,
got to the point where the debt overtook me,
okay.
because I kept again going back to every time I would think about, ooh, what would my mother do? That straightened me out real fast.
Yes, I understand. I understand. So that's good to know. And so that's important for everybody to know because it does kind of pull away from the things that you want to do if you get overextended and then you have to dig yourself out of a hole for sure.
Right. Yes,
Did you have any side hustles while you were teaching?
I did. I started. My first job was as a tutor when I was age 12, and I have been. So my side hustle was tutoring. When I lived in Michigan, I tutored. I tutored personal tutoring, and I was charging at the time $35 an hour. And I would do groups and I would do individuals, and I was making a whole lot of money off the books.
You shouldn't say that on the podcast.
Oh, I wasn't making a whole lot of money.
Exactly. So with you, I remember you tutoring when growing up, and I feel like I remember you teaching at the community college
I was
growing
gonna
up.
say, yeah, you're right. I did. I taught at the community college in Michigan as well, in Lansing as well.
Yeah,
And I
that's what
also did a summer program in Michigan.
I.
So I did a
Okay.
lot.
Okay. I don't remember summer programs. Audience, all I remember is us going to a lot of museums, a lot of zoos, a lot of like activities. Like she had like a whole schedule for us when we were growing up. People be like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, it's not sitting at home because we got a schedule."
That's
So
right.
that's the teacher part or whatever. And
Right.
that's how we were raised. So would you do anything differently than what you
Mm,
did? Like if you could go back?
that's a hard question. As far as my teaching career, as far as financial, or
I
just in
would say
general.
teaching career related to financial. Like, is there some way you would have maneuvered differently that you think would have been more beneficial, or are you happy where you landed with the choices that you made?
If I could go back to do things differently, I think I would have continued putting money into my Michigan accounts
Okay.
when I moved to Georgia.
Okay.
That's the only thing that when I sit back and think, I'm like, why did I not just send? Because it threw me moving to Georgia, and things were so different that I never got back on track and said, well, wait a minute, just send it to Michigan, because I
Hmm.
could easily have sent my money to Michigan instead of leaving it here, especially since I didn't retire.
Exactly. Okay.
So
Okay.
so that would be my difference.
That makes sense. And then for like a baby teacher who doesn't know anything, what would you say is the number one piece of advice you would give to a baby teacher that's just starting out, just graduated, they're in the first classroom and they don't have any classroom management skills? Which I would say, so let's do this. Give them a financial advice and a classroom management advice.
Okay, financial advice on day one, set up at 401, 403, what is it, 403B?
3B.
Do that. And for the classroom advice, don't smile for at least a week. Let them think you're hard. Even if you're not, let them think you're hard. Because if they think you're hard, you got them.
Okay.
And the other thing, too, with the classroom, pick the worst child in there to be your best friend.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said that worked for me, the picking the worst child, because
Mm-hmm.
always the kids that surprised me the most, that I feel like I made the most impact on, were the ones that other teachers would come to me and say they're horrible in my class and they're this and they're that, and I would
Right,
tell them, I would say, and my philosophy as a teacher was, I don't really want to know what you think, because I want to get to
right,
know the student first on my own and give them a chance to build a new relationship with me. And because I
right,
did that, I would have such a great relationship with those students. And I'd be like, they are night and day. They come in my room. They like, Miss Lawrence, what can I do? Do you need
right.
me to do anything? And I'm like, ooh, this is a whole different child. And I just didn't have
Mm-hmm.
that experience. And so I would even say to baby teachers, give kids a chance the other teachers may have told you they had a bad relationship with, because just know that kids are going through different things. They're bringing whatever that is to school, and they may actually have something that affected them that made them maybe behave out of character, whatever. And they might just need somebody to really show they care. And so that's part of why we do what we do. But that is probably the biggest lesson that I learned as a teacher.
And
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, and following up on what you just said, a good quote to remember is, they don't care what you know till they know that you care.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's a great place to end our call today. I just want to say thank you so much. This
You're
is my
welcome.
second mom, Miss Retion George. She is a veteran teacher, and I like to say she was a great teacher. All I remember is all
Oh,
her
thank you.
kids coming, and you can see the impact and the educator that she was, because to this day we still have her students that come to our family get-togethers, and they people say, "Who is that at Thanksgiving?" I'd be like, "Girl, that's somebody she taught in 19 whatever whatever," and I'd be like, "Okay, and who is that?" That's another one, you know. And so she was that teacher for those students, and so we appreciate your service, and I want to thank you so much for being my first guest on my podcast.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye bye.
Powered by Riverside.